Welcome back to Rounding the Bases, Extra Innings with Maki Moussavi. We talked quite a bit about her book, The High Achiever's Guide, Transform Your Success Mindset and Begin the Quest to Fulfillment. I hope you'll check that out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. But let's hit the final four questions for you now. The first one, and you and I both have managed to stay clean on this podcast. That's good. But, I had a lunch with you, and I don't think there was ever a four-letter word mentioned. I love those four-letter words, by the way, but I'm not allowed to say them on TV. I could say them here if we check the box, but we don't have to check the box if we don't. Regardless, I'm reading through this book, and I'm like, wow, there's some good chapter titles in here. I know these words. These words are in my house all the time, but there was a genuine aspect to it as well. I'm like, hey, wait. This woman's not afraid to drop some language here too. Tell me about that process, because that's not easy putting that in a book, or maybe it was.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is it didn't feel hard. In the book, I felt it, for whatever reason, it came out this way, and I feel fortunate. It felt a lot like the way that I would talk to somebody. And I was kind of going for that. I wanted the person who read it to feel like we were having a conversation. And for better or worse, that's how I talk. I kind of swear like a sailor. I have to check myself in front of my kids and, in different venues, depending on who's in the audience and things like that. But I feel like there's just an authenticity to using four-letter words that is real. And sometimes it's warranted. And sometimes it makes a point better than trying to stay safe. And the whole point of this is to stop trying to be safe. And it just felt like an appropriate use of language.
You can come hang out in the locker room with me anytime.
Perfect.
You'll fit in perfectly.
I might make you blush. So
that's right. I mean, that's okay. Second question as we round the bases, when you look through your resume and you're exactly where you want to be right now, even if it's not where you thought you would be, which is the beauty, I think, of the journey. But start listing some of the things that you did at Cerner, and to me, they don't even register in my world. Critical care and infection control. I don't even know is it genomics? Genomics, right? Which would have to do with genetics.
And yes.
So how did you end up? I know how you ended up where you're at now. How did you end up there?
So what I did was, after I got my degree in genetic counseling, it's still a pretty esoteric line of work. So depending on where you live in the country, there's only so many jobs in that space. And when I moved back to Kansas City, there really weren't any. And I ended up working at KU Medical Center for a while. And then what it would have taken to get a genetic counseling job is essentially somebody would have had to have left their position, which didn't look like it was going to happen anytime soon. And I thought, well, let me just go see what else is out there. I always thought I wanted to take that knowledge and apply it differently. And so I did a little research, saw Cerner, and I was like, oh, it's healthcare, IT, maybe there's an opportunity there. And interestingly enough, it was through an interview for a position that was completely unrelated that the person interviewing me said, you ought to be talking to the people here who are building software to support genetic testing. And I didn't even know there was such a group. So I did a little Googling, found the person in charge of that, cold contacted him via email, and 9 months later, they had created a position for me.
So now we know, and all part of your journey. All right, third question, we'll go a little bit more lighthearted here, but you did write in the book about the importance of wardrobe for you, which sounds like, okay, just a silly little thing. And it can be. I like those silly little questions sometimes. It's important to me too, by the way. But the deeper meaning is that oftentimes something like that has to do with your childhood, or has to do with the way that you were raised, or the influences, which goes into so much of what you've talked about, the way we've been programmed from early on. So tell me about that a little bit, because this didn't just pop up with you waking up one day saying, fashion and my wardrobe are extremely important. It's part of your background.
It is. I didn't really have the freedom to express myself and dress the way I wanted to when I was a child. It just wasn't a focus for my parents to provide, a wardrobe that kind of kept you up to speed with your peers and things like that. And there was one incident in particular where there was a dress that I got for Christmas that I was just in love with. And I was very young. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I got in trouble for something, and my dad cut it up. He cut it up with scissors. And I never forgot that. It was just such a reminder of not being able to have what I wanted. And in that case, it was something that I was really excited about because it kind of represented a departure from the norm. I mean, I had clothes to wear and all those things. It was like that piece of me that kind of wanted to be fashionable, didn't really get to shine. And that stuck with me. So from that moment on, it had the opposite of the intended impact. Clothes became very, very important to me. So from then on, it mattered.
Well, I guess you could thank your dad for
Right.
giving you
Yeah.
the fashion sense that you have now.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's one way to look at it, I
Yeah.
suppose. All right. Fourth question and the walk off for me, and I'm always just fascinated by certainly backgrounds where people come and just this world that we live in too. I mean, if you think about where you've been, where your family is from, even here in the United States, people think of Iran and they think of whatever it might be. Oh, that's a bad place, terrorist. Or first off, I think that there are beautiful. I'm the eternal optimist. There are beautiful people everywhere in this world, but we get just the influences, right, and the stereotypes, and until we've been there and we meet people. That's why I always say, like, face to face, getting to know people, being in different communities, having diverse backgrounds makes us all better. But here you are, as a young girl. If you had been growing up in the Big Apple instead of the Little Apple in the other Manhattan, but there's another, Iranian. There's another. I mean, New York is as great a melting pot as there is in all of the world. Manhattan, Kansas is not that. You end up in school and in grad school, and you're in places that probably don't have as many Iranian Americans at that point. What was that like for a young girl who, and I know you told me a little bit about this, I find it fascinating, who looked a little bit different than everybody else, but not a lot different. So you were just one of the girls, you were just one of the group, but yet maybe not everybody totally understood what you were going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I joked with you that I should have been a spy because nobody can really pinpoint where I'm from. But I think that there's truth to that. It's at times it's very seamless, and I feel like I blend in, if you will. And then there are times when I do not. And when I was younger, it made for a little bit of a sense of uncertainty around how I was going to be received in certain situations or certain settings. I very clearly remember when 9/11 happened, I was actually in graduate school and having to fly right in the aftermath of that, and having some very uncomfortable moments at the airport as the people behind the ticket counter were wondering what they were supposed to do with me. Were they supposed to let me go through? Were they not? Were they supposed to, have me answer some more questions? And then I would get feedback from like my graduate school class saying that I didn't have any particular advantage in talking to people from other ethnic minorities because they would just perceive me as just a regular, white girl. And so it felt like mixed messages sometimes that I really had to sort out for myself. And ultimately, just came to the conclusion that I try not to get offended when people ask me what my background is. They're just curious. Some people have a better way of doing it than others do. But it's a part of what makes me who I am, just the same way everybody else's background is. And I feel like it's really hard to be mad at anything that makes you who you are, or even the experiences that come with that. So, and I'm probably saying that from a position of privilege because I have been in that place where I can kind of go either way, just depending on who I'm with.
I think, I think position of privilege, it's all relative, right?
Right.
I mean, it's maybe different than what your parents had, or,
Right.
What your kids will have. And of course, the perspective your kids will have will be influenced by you and your husband and everything that you've gone through in your childhood.
Right.
And so no doubt about it, it is a matter of perspective. It's an interesting one, at least to me as well. I want to remind everybody to check out our audio podcast on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And you can check out more on Maki and her book at MakiMoussavi.com, MakiMoussavi.com. It's up on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube. It's in the show notes. Again, Maki, appreciate it. So much insight. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thank you so much for having me.